Hey everyone, I'm Robbie Cornthwaite.
I'm Daniel Mullen.
I'm Angelo Costanzo.
I'm Marco Flores.
I'm Marcelo Garuska.
I'm Ian Fife.
This is Casio, and you're watching.
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 And you are watching
Purebred Reds, Adelaide United Fan TV.
Hi, I'm Daniel Mullen, former Adelaide United player and Asian Champions League winner with Western Sydney Wanderers. When it comes to any of my soccer needs, I do my shopping here at Soccer Locker. An Australian-owned and operated business, the store is located at Shop 5 of 181 to 183 Grange Road, Findon. Founded in 2017, Soccer Locker was introduced into the market to fulfil all the soccer-related needs of Australians, providing a huge range of quality clothing and equipment ranging from soccer balls, team kits, goalkeeper gear, accessories and much more. Recently arrived stock also includes stunning retro kits from some of our favourite past eras as fans of the world game. Soccer Locker is a specialist in Premier range boots, Adidas and Puma, goalkeeper gear and licensed merchandise. Visit us online at www.soccerlocker.com.au with free delivery Australia-wide. So get shopping now at our Findon store, open from 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. from Monday to Friday and open Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Hello and welcome to the Purebred Reds Adelaide United Fan TV. We are back for our fourth season doing this show, and I'm thrilled to welcome a man to help preview our game against Floreat Athena in the FFA Cup this Sunday. He played nearly 300 games of top-flight football in Australia, was also the director of football at Adelaide United from 2015 to 2019. I speak of Ante Kovacevic. Ante, welcome to the show. Let us know what you've been up to in this weird long off season. You were recently at Western United. You've since moved back to WA. So tell us how you've been and how you've enjoyed the football in more recent times.
Thanks for having me, Ellis. Obviously finished up at the end of last season with Western United. Just had the 1 year there. Obviously with Melbourne and the way things were going there with lockdowns and the COVID issues, I was happy to get out of there and get to Perth, back to Perth anyway, as quick as possible. Obviously moved back here and, in terms of getting involved in football just as an observer these days, back over here in Perth, obviously watching the local leagues for the last couple of months, obviously enjoying it. Bit of a normal life here in Perth, so that's definitely a bonus, as much it is similar to Adelaide, I suppose, but compared to Melbourne and Sydney. So, I've been enjoying that, just taking some time off and enjoying, I suppose, just clearing the head, staying out of the game for a while and just enjoying it as a neutral observer, as I said, and, obviously looking forward to the FFA Cup game this week.
Great stuff. Yes, the FFA Cup game between Floreat Athena and Adelaide United. You obviously have been at both clubs and been very influential at both clubs over quite a long while. So we're going to talk all about that. There's plenty to get through, talking about your career too. But before we touch on any of that, Ante, I just want to get your overall impression of where the game's at right now. Obviously, we've seen the new TV deal with Paramount Plus, which I think has been a winner with every fan, but you may have your own view on that after overseeing so many years of the Fox Sports arrangement with the A-League. You would probably know a lot more ins and outs that the general punter doesn't know with regards to the operating details with the TV broadcaster and how influential they are to the running of the game. Also want to ask you what your opinions are on COVID and the way that's affecting everything at the moment, because we obviously don't have a concrete start date as yet, which is not ideal for fans because we want that bit of certainty. We haven't had it for so long.
Yeah, the state of the game. Obviously there's a lot of uncertainty around the game at the moment, obviously with start dates with the season. It's disappointing from obviously being in Victoria and having the league shut down there for a second year running. I think it's obviously bad for Victorian football, so I definitely feel for the players over there and the clubs. With the league now, with the new TV deal, I'm not sure. I suppose there's obviously been a lot of positive mentions about it coming out of the APL and obviously the clubs. So they're obviously talking it up, which is what you expect from clubs. Now, ultimately, the clubs are going to be worried about what money, and most clubs, not all clubs, some are obviously financially viable and don't need the TV money, but a lot of clubs run off that TV money. Now, what that TV distribution is from that package that they pay yearly, I'm not sure. I've heard it's possibly around 1.7 or 1.8 million, possibly up to 2 million. Now, in contrast, the last Foxtel 6-year deal that we ultimately had, but then got cut back, was about 3.3 million to each club. Now, for clubs like obviously Adelaide United, Perth Glory, Newcastle, Central Coast, Brisbane, that's quite significant dollars to coming to the club and a significant percentage of the revenue. Clubs like Melbourne City, Sydney FC, West Sydney Wanderers, Melbourne Victory probably doesn't really matter for them. So that's a concern that obviously there's a 33% cutback, 1/3 of the TV money that's heading back towards the clubs. So I'm not sure how the clubs will be managing the lack of revenue or less revenue from what they've used to, and that was incredible. I don't know if that sort of income towards clubs from TV revenue has been there since, probably 10 or 12 years ago, because obviously gradually increased every year over since the beginning of the A-League. So that's definitely going to be a concern to some, and they might have to find other revenue streams, might have to cut back on player wages, whatever that may be, or staff wages. So it is a concern for, let's say, half the league's clubs. But as they say, you're only strong as your weakest link. So you do want each club of the A-League to be as strong as possible. You don't want any chains or anchors dragging the league back and having a big gap between the haves and the have-nots. So I think that's also dangerous for the league. And obviously the COVID era doesn't help. Obviously there's, a start date was penciled in for October 30th. That's no doubt going to be pushed back. I did hear probably about a month ago that they were already talking about pushing the league back. And most likely, well, back then they were talking about December. I know they've mentioned November, but I wouldn't be surprised if it starts in December. Last year started in after Christmas, so end of December. It started, managed the 26 round season. So to do that might be tough. So I would not be surprised if we go to a later start, December start, go to a 22 round season. So then everyone just plays each other twice and finish the season off with finals, obviously with their international break. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. Once again, it will depend on what the TV deal is, whether the TV broadcaster will be happy with showing less games, whether that's an issue or not with that actual TV deal. I'm not too sure on the ins and outs of that currently, obviously. So that'll all be, weighed up amongst the clubs and how they'll compete moving forward, because they did toy with that last year. I'm not sure if you remember, there was talk whether they'd go back to a 22-game season, because there was a rush to play those last 4 games, and they held off to the very last probably month to announce those games and play it out. Most clubs did do that because last year they did actually plan to play 26 games, and they didn't want to change it halfway through the season to say, well, now we're only going to play a 22-game season. But before the season kicks off, I don't think the clubs will have as much against playing a 22-game season. So that's, like I said, I think that's a possibility. I'll even later start in 22-round season and plus finals on top of that.
Fascinating insights. He's a very smooth operator. We're very glad to have him. I just want to ask you, Ante, on the potential news that there's going to be a league-wide rebrand happening and being unveiled very soon. I believe the idea behind this is to be more inclusive of all the leagues, so that you're not just marketing the A-League as one, you're marketing all the leagues as a collective. Do you think the league needs a rebrand so early on after they just changed the logos, I think only 3 or so years ago now? Is that necessary, or are they just doing it to align it with the new TV deal, the new era? Is that kind of what's being sold here?
Look, I think it's the takeover from the clubs, obviously with the league, the new independent league, if you like. I think they're probably just want to, and along with the new TV broadcaster. So I suppose it's, just to freshen it up. Personally, I don't see an issue with it, as long as there's nothing radical about it. They're not going to go to 35-yard penalty kicks or whatever like that, like they did in the MLS. But that's just joking aside. But I don't see an issue with it. There might be a rebrand. Like I said, it's just to launch the new season, obviously with the new TV deal, new streaming service with Paramount. So it's probably just going to generate hype for the new league and for the TV broadcaster as well. So I don't see much of an issue with it. Yeah, there was probably small tweaks with the rebranding of the league recently. Obviously, Hyundai's left. Maybe there's new sponsors on board they want to announce as well. So, look, it can be a positive as long as it doesn't affect the game. I think I'm more interested to see what they do actually with the league and starting the league and what the structure of the season will be.
Yeah, very well said. Well, let's dive straight into things. It's Adelaide United travelling to Perth to play Floreat Athena. The game is a 2:30 kickoff, South Australian time. being played at the E&D Litis Stadium in Perth this Sunday. If you're not travelling, make sure you tune into 10 Play to see the game live and free. No squads at the time of filming either. Now, let's start off, Ante, by discussing Adelaide United's recruitment heading into this season. This is an area that you were obviously very much across for a large period of time not that long ago. So I'll read out the signings. We've promoted Johnny Yell and Alexander Popovic, two very good players, I might add, from the NPL team. Nick Ansell comes in. George Blackwood returns along with Isaiah Sanchez, and Dakota Oschenchem has also been temporarily re-signed, I believe. In terms of departures, Michael Moroney, he's gone. Ryan Strain's left to go to Israel, as we all know. Don Costanzo released to go back to the NPL. Pacific Nyonga Bides headed your way out west to join Perth Glory. Noah Smith has jetted off to play for Central Coast Mariners. Yared Abichu, one I'm particularly disappointed about because we didn't get to see much of him at all. He's been released. Dakota Oskinchem was released but has been re-signed. Jordan Elsey, he's gone to Newcastle Jets, and Tommy Urich, he's gone to MacArthur. So noting that imbalance in midfield, and it's hard not to note it, how do you weigh up the way the squad is compromised currently with Adelaide United? Because obviously you were very much, this was in your remit once upon a time.
Yeah, look, it's as a former director there at the club, it's difficult to look, to want to cast judgment on what's happening now. I think it's, they've got their reasons for why they're doing it. I mean, I'll probably just want to talk about how I see it from a purely footballing point of view, and the coaches are there. Obviously Vito's come in there now as well. So look, obviously I know most of those players were around in the system when I was there. So it's good to see the young boys, obviously Popovic and Yule, come in. Alex Popovic were there in the reserve of the youth team as well when I was there. So it's good to see him step up. Hopefully we see, there's a lot of promise for the kid. But look, obviously losing Elsie, big one, obviously Tommy Urich, those significant parts. I think Carl Veart came out and said, Tommy Urich was the best striker in the league at the beginning of last year when they signed him, and obviously he's regarded very highly in the league, so it's a focal point that they'll miss. But look, I suppose they had, looking back last year, and once again, I'm just trying to talk as now a soccer fan, and obviously with the past, obviously attached to the club, but they probably had a bit of an imbalance last year with the Toure boys, Cassini, Yengi. I'm not sure if they're going to replace Tommy Urich there, but these boys are probably there to replace him anyway. And I know maybe a couple of Toure boys were being played out of position when they come off, and as they were coming off the bench towards the end of the season last year. Yengi obviously, staked his claim, and I thought did very well throughout the year, coming back from a long injury as well. So maybe they've got enough to make up for the loss of Tommy Urich, but now they're probably really relying on players that haven't really established themselves over a full season in the A-League. Obviously, Toure's had his time. Mo Toure's obviously done well as a young player. Cassini's had his, had spells throughout the year last year as well where he's done well. So now it's up to one of those to probably stake that claim as being their leading number 9 for the year, and really holding that spot. And whether what he does with the Toure boys, can he play them wide? I know he tried to play them wide, try to play them behind, maybe try to play 2 up front, 1 deeper. I don't know if it actually worked for the boys and for the performance of the team in terms of the balance they actually had. So yeah, like I said, I think it's up to one of those boys to stake their claim. In midfield, you mentioned obviously Sayis has come back. Obviously, he was a key figure for the club during my time there as well. Look, now, just looking at Sayis now, I do remember the year of 2016-17, we actually signed James Holland, who was a number 6 player as well. So what that led to was Sayis playing a more advanced role and being out of his probably best position that he played for the club. Now, as we all know, that wasn't our best year. I think we finished second last that year. And maybe that, I know James Holland was only there for a half a year, but potentially you don't really want to, you want to play your best players in their best positions. And Isaias is definitely one of those that, if I've got Isaias as number 6, then he's playing there all year. What they want to do now with one day, obviously Luis Dorigo is another young player that actually replaced Isaias when he left. Luis Dorigo took that spot, and I thought he did very well when he first came onto the scene. But really, and I know Luis Dorigo last year played outside of his ideal position, which he did play throughout his whole youth career and starting of the A-League career as a number 6. So was he, did we lose something, or Adelaide United lose something from Lewis playing as that advanced role as a number 8 and pushing forward? And credit to the kid, he scored goals, or scored a couple of goals, or 1 goal, I think I remember seeing him scoring. But that's what the danger is now. If you've got one day Luis Dorigo, Isaias, and obviously Stefan Mork, is he going to rejig the team, the lineup, the formation? Obviously, it's up to Carl and Ross how they want to see their best, get the best out of their players. So it's going to be an interesting one. But like I said, just from my experiences, seeing Gissy's play out of his position in that year wasn't the best thing for the team then. And, that's something that, the coaching staff are going to have to weigh up. So, is one day going to be playing? Is he going to come off the bench? No, he's getting on in age as well. And then what do you do with Luis Dorigo? Like I said, I do think over the 2 years he's been involved with the first team on a regular basis, as a number 6 in that first year under Gertjan Verbeek, I think was his best football he's played for the club.
Yeah.
So that's something, like I said, the coaching staff are going to have to consider.
Yeah, plenty of conundrums to weigh up. I want to ask you, Mork as the 10, would you back him in for another season playing there?
Yeah, look, once again, my fondest memory of Mork was playing as a number 8 in that grand final year when he joined the club halfway through the year. And I probably think that's probably still his best football he's actually played in Australia. And he's played some good football in Australia, not denying that. But obviously, I think in that spell of 12 or 13 games, I think it was fantastic and obviously led to an overseas career after that. He's been tried, I think, when he come in with Gertjan, tried to play him as a winger, in a 4-4-2 or whatever he was playing. He was playing out wide. He was playing as a 10 last year. Once again, I go back and I think a lot of coaches think that way. Sometimes you do want to play your best players in their best position. Now, Mork for me was that box-to-box midfielder. He was able to come in late into the box, score goals. Did score goals last year, credit to him. He was able to backtrack back and support his defensive midfield and his defensive lines. He had those engines. He was great, fantastic effort, work rate was just second to none. And that, I think, helped him. Now, I suppose the question is, do they have another number 10 that can play that role? Or, I suppose, can they get the best out of Mork in that number 10 role? I don't know. Does he play a 6 with 2 8s or 2 6s and a 10? It's going to be difficult. Once again, it's something that probably Carl's working through over this pre-season. Obviously, he's got a competitive game coming up this week, but he's probably got another month or two to work on it before the start of the A-League season to get it right. But that's definitely going to be going through the minds of the coaches, is to get that balance right. So sometimes you just want that right balance. And when you look at historically, the teams have a good balance of that, a great number 6 or 2 great number 8s, or 2 good 6s and a great number 10 or whatever it may be. It's just that balance. And once again, what they do with this Ayis and Mork and Dorigo and one day, that's a question for the coaching staff. But yeah, there's probably a few question marks on what is going to be the best formation, best structure, and the best position for these particular players.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Very detailed summation, which we love here. And I just want to acknowledge the masterstroke to get Mork back in 2016. Let's not let that one fade away from yourself and the Brains Trust there at the club back then, because that was pivotal in our title charge. So I just want to put that one on the record. Very well done. We owe you a lot for that one. Now, I want to press on here, Ante. The lack of friendly kind of astounds me here, because apparently it's Carl's decision not to play one. I'm sure they've done some stuff internally, but no friendly going into this game against NPL opposition. Even back in 2016-17, you'll recall the FFA Cup disaster against Redlands United. Now, preparation here concerns me because it's been a long off season, not having had a single hit out, despite the NPL guys playing. How much are you worried by the fact that there hasn't been a preseason game played officially by the senior team to prepare for this game? And do you think it lends credence to the view that Carl may well be looking to play a lot of those NPL guys because of the fact that they're the only ones that have been getting competitive games under their belts for the best part of the last couple of months?
Yeah, look, I think no doubt there'll be, probably 3 or 4 players that have been playing NPL regularly that might play on the weekend. I think it is beneficial to the teams, no doubt. I know we've had times where they're in good condition, they've played a number of games and they're ready for that match fitness. I think that'll be definitely important for the team. Look, I know sometimes A-League clubs have difficulties in arranging friendlies now. Obviously with the end of the season for the SA NPL there, maybe a lot of other clubs didn't want to play friendlies. Is it worth it? Have the Adelaide United got the numbers to actually play a friendly NPL as well? And if you're going to play these, you do want to work on things. You do want to actually play the team that you're working with for that game. So whether Carl and the coaching staff thought that, probably doing things at training, and whether they're playing some sort of internals at training to actually work on what they wanted to for this game may have been more beneficial. I'm not too sure the reasons on that. So there always are. There's always more than one reason why something can happen or doesn't happen. So I'll not sure why, but look, it is difficult. Thanks for reminding me about the Redlands game, and I think all the players that were involved in that were shattered by it, and obviously I was too. So it's not the way you want to start especially if the preseason is going to go for another 2 months. That FFA Cup is quite beneficial to give the team competitive games against different opposition, sometimes outside of your state. So it does actually feel like you are preparing for a seriously competitive game. So. It's a tough one. It just depends on the boys and what they've been doing. I think they started probably back in mid-July, so they've probably had 7 or 8 weeks of pre-season training already. Have they had a break here and there? I'm not too sure. So you'd like to think if they haven't had many injury issues, I think they should come in as well prepared as any. I'd like to. Once again, if I was involved with the A-League team, I'd like to think that they'd still be enough for an NPL team. But you can't discount an NPL team coming up against an A-League team as Redlands did. They always want to show them up. They always lift that extra bar higher than they would against another local NPL team because they've got things to prove individually and collectively. And so the coaches always, they're preparing better for that game than they probably would for a regular NPL game. So that all works against an easy game, I suppose. So, but look, I'd like to think that Adelaide should be obviously not prepared from a match point of view, not playing any practice games against other competition. I'd like to think that Carl and Ross have been around long enough to know what it needs for the team to be prepared for this game. So, look, it is a long trip. I'm not sure. I assume they're coming over on Saturday as well. It is a long trip for the boys coming over. It's a 1 o'clock kickoff here in WA, Western time. Hopefully it's not too hot for the boys. I'm not sure on the weather. I haven't actually checked the weather, but if the sun's shining, and today was about 27 degrees, so 28 degrees, so it is pretty warm in Perth when it's at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. But look, these are the sort of things. I'm not sure on the condition of the ground. I did see it a couple of weeks ago. It's not in great it's not a Hindmarsh Stadium, for instance. It's not. I know the boys have been working on it over the last couple of weeks, but if the condition of the ground doesn't contribute to some good, football being played, and knocking the ball around as Adelaide like to do over the number of years, that just might even the competition up a little more as well. So all these little variables can, obviously lead to a tough day at the office. But and probably as normally goes, the longer the game goes at 0-0 and Athena's in the game, the more those local NPL boys will lift and raise the bar and see a potential upset, and that's what's happened in the past a number of times. And that's what we saw against Redlands. And as that game went on, it seemed like the Redlands were actually lifting the bar and improving as players and, getting their second wins, where normally in an NPL game, the game slows down after, 60, 70, 80 minutes. But so there's some things that just, obviously no doubt the coaches are concerned about it from Adelaide, but, it won't be easy. I'm sure Adelaide's looking forward to the game, no doubt. But it is, look, I think the earlier they score, the better, the more comfortable they'll feel, no doubt.
Most definitely. I think in terms of our itinerary, we are travelling there on the Saturday, leaving on the Sunday straight after the game. I believe that's because the leagues are not paying for more than one night of accommodation for every club. So it really does feel more like NPL than A-League at the moment regarding the Adelaide United setup. Maybe that will play into Floreat's advantage. Let's press on. Ante, you did mention the stadium before, the END Litis Stadium. You obviously know it very well, having played there and managing Floreat too. So looking at it, for me, it almost comes across as a bit more of an intimidating version of Martin. I think there's a bit more of a seating kind of arrangement than what Martin is, but nevertheless, that intimate kind of local venue, which, can really play into the hands of the hosts, being the NPL side. So, how much can the venue sort of favour Floreat?
Yeah, look, I think the boys are probably the club's looking at a good crowd turnout. So hopefully, somewhere between 2,500, 3,000 people. So, and it is a bit of a, similar to Martin, as you mentioned, fair point. It is pretty much a bowl surrounding the ground. So it is like the crowd's on top of you. And as you know, these smaller NPL grounds, it's the fans are an arm length away from the fence, and and you hear everything that comes from there. And if it is a bigger crowd, it will be probably a bit more intimidating. The Floreat Athena fans are very passionate about their club. You've got a boisterous, no doubt, there'll be a bigger boisterous content of boys that support the club. For this game, it'll be one of the biggest club games. Obviously, they played Melbourne City, I think, a few years ago as well. But this time is their first time at the home venue, so it carries a bit more emotion for them. So look, I think it'll be a great, and like I said, hopefully the turnouts reaches about 3,000, and I think it'll be a great event for Adelaide United as well, for an A-League club to come to that ground and feel that emotion, feel the passion, I suppose, from the club. Like I said, hopefully the pitch is the pitch will be in decent. They played there 2 weeks ago, so it's had a couple of weeks now of reparations to get it up to a decent level for a good football game. But like I said, the crowd's looking forward to it. There's a bit of a buzz now. There's people talking about it. There's a bit in the paper about it. So obviously the club's been planning to. I know they were hoping to ensure the game is at their home venue. There was a bit of discussion about playing at another venue that's been approved by FA previously, but being a day game, the main issue was the lights, having no lights there or decent enough lights for an A-League team. So that's not an issue being played at 1 o'clock. So they look for a great game, and that venue deserves to be filled with a few thousand people to create a bit of a cauldron for the club. And like I said, I think both teams will enjoy it.
Yeah, I
it's
think
just a shame that there's no Adelaide fans coming over too. Maybe Port Adelaide made the final. There probably could have been a few Adelaide fans staying behind, but anyway.
There is one going, and I'll shout him out, Antonis Spagonis. He'll be there. Unfortunately, can't line that trip up with his beloved Port Adelaide. But just on the ground, I think it's an important thing that more of these kinds of grounds are showcased to on the national stage, because usually with games being held in WA in the FFA Cup, we've only ever seen Dorrien Gardens being used as the venue. It's an important thing. We want to get that character across that these grounds can offer. Let's focus more on the actual side, Floreat, a club like we know that is very close to you and your heart. You departed there only last year. You were the head coach. They had a very strong season last year in the Perth NPL. They've been just as good this season, if not better, making it to a grand final. They lost 6-3 just very recently to Perth Soccer Club. So you'd know what makes this club tick, having been the head coach there, Ante. So who are the likely standouts in terms of personnel for Floreat? And like we mentioned before, and I'm sorry to bring it up again, do they have the potential to be our second Redlands?
Look, so going back to the team, look, obviously I played there and at the stadium too for 5 years after I finished my A-League career here at Perth Glory. I enjoyed my time there. Great people, great club, great history. And I coached them obviously last year, and my assistant coach that was there with me has taken over and led the club over the last, obviously this season as well. So he's had a fair bit of success. They won the cup to qualify for the FA Cup finals this year. It's been great for him and obviously great for the boys to win that and obviously have some silverware. They've had a good year. They actually started the year undefeated for the first 12 games and then fell in a bit of a rut and obviously lost the league championship by a few points. Couldn't make up the ground. So, look, they've had a good year. They've got a couple of good ex-A-League Perth Glory NPL players. Ludovic Boys won. I think he probably could have had a game or two in the seniors at Perth Glory as well. Phil Arnold's another one. Nick Ambrosio, a couple of definitely experienced NPL boys that have been around the league and have been quite influential and quite successful in the league. They're probably the three players that are the mainstays of the team. And probably what make the team tick. With the club's lost Dean Evans, their captain for the last number of years, and probably their best player, probably the best player of the league that's been here for the last number of years as well. He unfortunately did his knee throughout the year, which probably led to the similar time the team fell into a bit of a rut. So he was definitely a massive loss, obviously for the NPL season and for this game. And he actually did come to Adelaide when Floreat Athena played Adelaide Olympic there a couple of years ago in Adelaide, which I attended as well, and he scored a good goal from a free kick. They were up 2-0 and unfortunately lost, I think, 4-2 on that day, or 4-3 it could have been. But look, there's a few boys. Look, the team's been together for quite a while, so I think they know what makes them tick. They know that they're well organised. And I think, like I said, going back to my previous comments, I think playing against A-League opposition, I'd expect them to be even more alert, even more focused. Like I said, trying to prove a point individually to win their individual battles, but also collectively to ensure that they put up a good showing. And no doubt they want to go for an upset. Obviously, the coaching staff, the club, the players all do, down to to every one of them. So, like I said, so that's going to play into what's probably going to have to be their mantra is to ensure that they are, like I said, disciplined, hard to beat, difficult to break down. They'll know, Adelaide United. I think everyone knows the way Adelaide United plays, and obviously I've had discussions with the coach on the personnel and what have you. But over the number of years, not just this year, so he knows Adelaide United pretty well. Used to come visit us and come watch games with us there in Adelaide, so he knows the boys well enough to know what the dangers are, but also what the boys at Floreat Athena need to do to negate those dangers. And like I said, stay in the game as long as possible. I think that's what it is for most of these NPL teams. Stay in the game as long as possible. Ensure you don't get broken down. Ensure you're disciplined. Make it difficult for them. And then teams always make mistakes. It's early in the season for the A-League team. So, will they tire as the game goes on? Time will tell. And as they tire, maybe, the NPL club gets further into the game. So, look, I'm looking forward to a good game, but like I said, I'd like to see Floreat Athena obviously just put up a good, very competitive game, stay in the game as long as possible, and make it exciting for the punters that to show up on the weekend.
Yeah, very well said. I want to ask you quickly, there's a general view here in SA, and I'm not sure how educated this opinion seems to be that's reverberating around a lot of football circles, but there's an opinion here that the WA NPL is significantly worse than the NPL in terms of standard here. So I want you to address that. And does that also play into the narrative of us underestimating Floreat Athena? Because it feels, despite the fact that this game isn't really being covered with any degree of high profile kind of media attention, it does feel as though everyone's kind of assuming that we're just going to tick this one off and move right on. So is the view that the WNPL, is nowhere near what we have here in SA? Is that off? And could it be a dangerous way to sort of enter this game without our fans being there? Obviously, these kinds of things are going to enter the minds of the players.
Yeah, look, I think you need to define what you mean by worse, right? Now, I look at it as a depth of talent issue, right? So obviously Victoria and New South Wales are bigger leagues, bigger populations. So their depth of talent can span, 10, 12 clubs there. And, there's a lot of upsets there. And the big money spenders sometimes don't make the top 5, top 6. I think in Adelaide, it's probably less so. I think, if you're spending money in Adelaide, you're almost guaranteed a top 6 position. And then beyond that, it starts falling away. I think in WA, I think you're looking at, there's just a shallower talent pool here in WA, but which doesn't mean that the top 2 or 3 teams cannot compete against the top. Might come up against the top 6 teams in Adelaide and maybe the top 8 or 9 teams in Melbourne, right? So when you see the NPL championships that occurred pre-COVID, I think I remember watching Metro Stars come across here, and I think they just won on penalties. So the best against the best in Adelaide aren't that much better than the best in Perth, right? And in Victoria for that matter, because I know Metro Stars went to South Melbourne and beat, I think Ivan Kalic was coach here, went to South Melbourne, beat South Melbourne away, went to Bonnyrigg, beat Bonnyrigg away. But I think the depth of talent in Victoria and New South Wales would be bigger than South Australia, but that doesn't mean the best of South Australia cannot beat the best of Victoria. So that's what I think is then you look at the 6th place team in WA may not be better than the 6th place team in South Australia, and definitely wouldn't be better than the 6th place team in Victoria. So that's where I think the talent pool drops off probably in WA quicker than it does in South Australia. So that's what I think is the way I define it in terms of what league's better and what isn't. So that's, even I'll tell you, I did play in this league, and I think the detrimental thing to the players is that they're not getting the top 2 teams here are not getting the best games every week. Now in Victoria, you got a tough game every week. In South Australia, tough game most weeks.
Yes.
My first year back in 2007, we went undefeated in this league here, and I can tell you that in some of those games we played at 60-70%, right? And we still won the game. Now that's not good for development of players. It's good for me as an older player playing in the NPL. I enjoyed it. But it's not good for development of players to play. Players to play at the best need to be playing at the best regularly. They can't just turn it on one game and play at 60% the other game. So that's where I'm leading to probably the differences between WA and SA and Victoria, if you like, or across the country. So is it better? Like I said, the games that have NPL during those NPL championships, I don't think there's been a blowout between the best of SA that have played WA at those times. There hasn't been a blowout in the games. So which means the best 11 that come up with a championship team from Adelaide is going to be quite competitive with the championship winning team here in WA. So that's where I think is the comparison. But then it's the depth of talent that falls away throughout the league that may not be as deep here as it is in SA.
I'm glad you
SA football. Yeah. So hopefully I made myself clear there. Like I said, it's not about denigrating. I don't think you can say this league's better than this league because it depends what your definition is. Yeah. And that's the way I'd like to define it. It's the depth of talent may not be here as much as it is in SA.
I'm certainly glad you unpacked that as comprehensively as you did, because I meant no disrespect to the level in WA. It just seems to be the way that some people are feeling going into this game. I guess they might be looking at Perth Glory's success at NPL level there, Ante, and sort of pitting it against our struggles here. We've only had really the one season where we've competed and made finals. So, make of it what you will, but that seems to be the feeling. Important to address it nevertheless. The time has come for me to ask you for your prediction, Ante. Two clubs that I'm sure are close to your heart. So, being as neutral as you can be, how do you see this one panning out?
Look, like I said, I do want a competitive game. I think I think it's the first. I know obviously Brisbane Roar played last week and a couple of other state league clubs from Queensland. Hopefully it's a good game for TV's purposes. Hopefully it's a good game for the crowd that attends. I suppose I always like an underdog. And as being involved in Adelaide United, we're always the underdogs against the big fish in the A-League. So I always like an underdog story. And look, if I was working for Adelaide United, obviously, my answer would be quite simple. But I suppose I wouldn't mind an underdog story here. And I do have, I suppose, my most recent connection was with Floreat Athena last year when I coached them. So, like I said, I'd like to see a competitive game. And if Floreat Athena pulls an upset off, I won't be upset. But if Adelaide United win, I won't be upset either. Like I said, as long as we have a good spectacle there for the punters and for TV.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll
as neutral as possible.
We'll let you off with that one. I'd be exactly the same if I was there supporting a local side. It's like that here whenever a Victorian or whoever comes here, NPL side, A-League side, we always want to see the NPL teams do well. So we can't fault you there. Let's move into discussing yourself, Ante, the man behind the player who got 300 odd top flight games in Australia as a centre back. You also had a short stint in Malaysia with Selangor. So let's take it right back to the beginning. You're a Melbourne boy and you started playing your career in the early 90s with St Albans in the Victorian NPL. I assume the Croatian heritage had a part to play there in you playing for St Albans, Ante?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and I had cousins playing there, and as I was growing up, obviously we were affiliated. The parents coming over from overseas, and obviously the clubs being a hotbed of culture and what have you, and the immigrants coming over, and obviously the familiarity amongst those clubs. So yes, St Albans was a smaller club in Melbourne, a smaller Croatian club. Melbourne Knights were obviously the NSL club.
Yeah.
So we obviously played my junior football there, and obviously started playing senior football in the NPL there. With St Albans, and before and much like it happened, that's how it happened in the 70s and 80s. A lot of those clubs were tied obviously ethnically, and before the move to Melbourne Knights in '94.
Yes, I was about to get to that. So from one Croatian club to another, but a significantly bigger one considering this was NSL and a heavyweight of the NSL, and you had so much success there as well, Ante. So I guess reminisce for us about your time there at the Knights, because it, I'm sure, holds some very special memories for you, and you would have played with some absolute ballers.
Yeah, it was. Look, obviously I was a young supporter of Melbourne Knights throughout the earlier years. I think they lost 3 grand finals out of 4 years in the early 90s. 2 of those were against Adelaide City. But then obviously supporting the team throughout my younger years, and then joining them in '94 with the likes of Mark Viduka, Danny Tiato, Steve Horvat, obviously Andrew Marth, Joe Spiteri, Frank Jurich in goals. So yeah, it was a Fausto Dimic. So the team was great, and I think I do remember an article come out and said it was probably, I think it was the youngest team to ever win a national championship from NSL/A-League competition. And I joined them as a 20-year-old, and I felt, yeah, look, it was, I just felt it was the way forward for Australian football. And I think the players that went overseas, players that played Socceroos and players that had distinguished careers in Australia and wherever, was enormous from that squad and across the league, beyond there. So look, we obviously played Adelaide City in that final. We were probably going head to head all year with Adelaide City. They had a great team as well, obviously coached by the brilliant Zoran Matic too. They were always, obviously there was our South Melbourne derby in Melbourne, which was a massive game, but Adelaide City were probably the next major rival for us because obviously the two grand final losses earlier over, both in Melbourne as well. I think we did go head to head that year and obviously picked them for top spot, and then the two semi-finals against Adelaide City, and then obviously the grand final at Hindmarsh Stadium, which was a marvellous spectacle in itself. And it was just a great year, and obviously playing with these footballers. Unfortunately, I started playing the year, and I think I played 4 games, and I had a major injury with osteitis pubis. And obviously there was a lot of unknowns there about what this injury was, and it was groin injury, it was a pubic injury, and people have not there was no treatment for it, so it was quite frustrating. So I missed about 3 months, and then come back towards the end of the season and started playing games, and obviously come off the bench in the grand final, which as a young 20-year-old, it was just a fantastic experience, and obviously very memorable. And then obviously a bit of payback, losing to Adelaide twice in Melbourne to go to Adelaide and win that final in front of their home fans, which was a massive occasion for Adelaide, and it felt great being in Adelaide during that weekend as well. And no doubt Adelaide was buzzing, and that was good. And then obviously we backed it up the year after. Once again, we had a young Joe Simonich come across from Canberra, join us from the OS, the Melbourne Knights too, and what a player he became. Shame he didn't play for Australia, because he would have
Totally.
He would have been, I'd like to think he would have made Australia a serious contender I'm not saying we're going to win the World Cup, but definitely better than what we were throughout those years. I think he ended up playing 100+ games for Croatia, played a number of Euros, World Cups, and the works. He's probably the most decorated Australian player that's actually played some major tournaments, being the Euros and the World Cups.
Yeah.
Obviously we play Asian Cup, so not as decorated as a European Cup or European Championship, but so another great player. And another great, he was 18, 19 when he joined us, but he was a phenomenal player. And it was, he was a peer for me. We were young players, we were mates, we were friends, we got to know each other very well. So we were creating a friendship and obviously playing together. And so that was fantastic. So obviously won the championship the year after against Marconi too. So my first 2 years won 2 championships, so great experience. And that was, so then spent another 4 years at Melbourne Knights. Made finals, I think, another year or two, and that was it for Melbourne Knights. Obviously, the bigger clubs started coming in. Your Carltons, your Parramatta Powers, Perth Glories, Northern Spirits, paying a lot more money. So obviously, the smaller clubs were potentially not spending as much money and losing those good players. And players wanted to, I suppose, play professional football. And Carlton offered that, Perth Glory offered that, Northern Spirit were offering full-time wages, and in the part-time NSL, that was a big thing. So. Obviously, Melbourne Knights, I went on to captain Melbourne Knights, I think, for 2 or 3 years as well. I went to Andrew Marth, moved on to Carlton, who was another fantastic player and leader. He was a fantastic leader, and I think I went and captained a couple of sides beyond that. And I think I owe a lot to him.
Old Stabber.
Stabber scored a great goal there in Adelaide as well. I think he was, one of the top goal scorers, probably until Archie Thompson, top goal scorers in grand finals. But he was a great leader, and he was a fearsome leader of the team. And like I said, he was a great captain to play under. I think I don't know whether that, with people do co-captains these days, and it's not as probably not as hierarchical within a team as it used to be. And back then it was a leader in the troops, and that's kind of the way it was. But so like I said, and then I think I spent 6 years in the NSL with Melbourne Knights before coming across to Adelaide for my first stint in Adelaide, which joining Adelaide City with Zoran Matic.
It would be remiss of me not to ask you just quickly, seeing Mark Viduka and his development, being alongside him, it was a real eventful time. I'm sure you recall the fiasco with his allegiance and where it should lie, because we had a young Socceroos camp that I believe was scheduled during the season, and the chairman of the Knights was at odds with the national youth coach. So seeing all that happen, what was it like? Because Mark Viduka, I think for the younger fans, they don't particularly realise just how good he was. He was 16 or whatever he was when he top scored the NSL, which is just ridiculous. It's stupid. It wouldn't ever happen again in our lifetimes. So what was it like, seeing Dukes from a young age? And did you ever have any doubts that he'd become the legendary figure that he did?
Yeah, look, I actually, going back to my junior years, I was playing at St Albans. Mark Viduka was playing the same age group with Melbourne Knights. So I saw him, and being a more defensive player, so I saw him as a kid now. Not that I knew what a superstar would be when I was a kid, but he was always a great player. And I think he actually played a year above his age group and still played well in those junior years. And he was obviously a big frame, so I was able to handle it physically. So I knew, obviously, played against him through all the junior years. So I think it was pretty obvious that he was going to become a player. I think most people knew that. How good he became, I don't know if anyone actually predicted that, but he was definitely a standout throughout the junior years and obviously through his early Melbourne Knights years. I think he was like I said, a 17, 18, 19-year-old or whatever, and he started as he was 17, but he won top goal scorer 2 years in a row, won the actual Johnny Warren Player of the Year award 2 years in a row, and the under 21 year Player of the Year award. So that's unheard of. Most of these new Johnny Warren medalists are not under 21.
Yes.
So that's how much of an impact he made on the league. Now, that's why it really bothers me, and I know a lot of media people don't want to do it, but I think they need to throw out the next Mark Viduka slogan out there on any player that scores a goal in the A-League, which really depresses me. I really don't know why they do that. I think Alassane Toure was probably the most recent one. Is he the best thing since Mark Viduka? And I beg the Fox Sports reporters, please don't say it's the next Mark Viduka, because what he did throughout those 2 years, once a player does that in the A-League, then perhaps we can throw that label on him. But please don't do it. It's not fair on the boys. It's unneeded attention and skepticism on the players when they start throwing names like that out. But that's the impact he had. And people, like I said, he was an under 21 player that won the Johnny Warren medals 2 years in a row, and obviously top goal scorer. So it was a serious player as a young age, and seriously so much better than what he was. Now, we actually, after the Adelaide City game, we actually went to Japan. And we played 2 games in Japan. I think we beat Jubilee Owata 3-0, and we drew 1-1 against the Yokohama team. And Viduka was a star performer there. I think he scored 2 goals against Jubilee. I don't think he scored all 3. May have scored all 3. I'm not sure. But I believe there was an instant $1 million offer from a Japanese club immediately while we were there. And obviously Viduka had his heart set on going to Europe at that time. And then the president of Croatia obviously got involved, so he managed to go over there. But he was making an impact, obviously, even going to Japan and winning comfortably 3-0 against, and I think Jubilee. I think J-League just started, so they were just in their formative years, but we were just an NSL part-time competition and managed to go and beat a team. Scalacci actually played for Jubilee Owata during that time, so it was a serious club that we were playing against, and he still went and dominated them too. So that's, like I said, that's the serious impact. So that's when you look back on it, and some players that actually did play in the NSL were actually performing and playing some very, very good football that, as you said, maybe the younger ones don't realise. Maybe, they haven't seen enough NSL, or, perhaps the peak of the NSL was in that 90s. I'm not sure. Obviously, the 80s had a special era as well. Yeah. Obviously, the formative years, but the 90s were maybe, did they peak? I'm not sure. I think there were some great clubs throughout definitely from the early 90s up until maybe 97, 98, whatever that may have been. But Adelaide City were a great team. Half of Adelaide City was the Socceroos team. A player like Milan Ivanovic in the defence there. South Melbourne had a great team. They won it twice. Later on with Ante Kovacevic, Marconi were always Sydney United had a great team when they made the final against Brisbane, and unfortunately lost that after dominating that a whole year. They had a lot of young players come through. Milicic and Popovic and Mark Rudin and coming through that team. So there was a lot of great teams, and I thought there was a lot of good football to be played. And it'd probably be, obviously we can't go back in time, but it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if there was professionalism back in the 90s for that number of players as well, and how much better they could have been. But then again, you look at it, and look, a lot of players that went overseas, because they wanted to play professional football, and they went overseas and stuck it out and made it over there. Now the A-League's too comfortable for players. It's too, it's tough over there. I'm not getting a game. I'm homesick. I'm coming home, and give me a $300,000 contract. It's too comfortable. Now, is that what's best? Yeah, it's great for the players. Australia, the A-Leagues, and the way I've seen it, I think it's just a too comfortable league. there's no players need to, as I mentioned earlier, players need to be challenged to improve, to be at their best as much as possible. Where that challenge is playing in a tough competition, being resilient, overcoming challenges. Whether it's playing, I still don't think 22 or 26 games is enough for a professional competition here. It's just too complicated. It's a great lifestyle in Australia. Summertime in Adelaide's fantastic. If I can just, and I played here in Perth Glory my final years. It was a great lifestyle. Did it bring the best out of my football? Probably not. Probably not. But it's a great lifestyle. And I don't think, when COVID hit and the TV deal was going to go bust, I thought maybe that's actually good for some of our players to go overseas. If they're not getting the money here, go overseas and become a better footballer. That's where everyone should want to strive to. There's no shame. The basketballers are going over to America. They need to go and play in the NBA. Our best players here need to go be playing in Europe. I think it's better for them. And that's what happened in the NSL days, because there was a part-time football only to come back to, so they stuck it out a bit harder than players do these days.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a wide-ranging chat that we can get into. We haven't even touched on Pro-Rel yet and how much of a difference that would make. But we'll stick on your career here for the time being, Ante. You obviously had that big move to Melbourne Knights, and then you followed that up with a stint playing for Green Gully before eventually moving across to Adelaide, where you signed with Adelaide City in 2000. Now, the early 2000s here in SA, and I'm sure some of the older fans will recall, probably wasn't really the height of what we'd seen in the past. There was no West Adelaide at that time, and despite producing so many talented players, the production line at Adelaide City is just phenomenal throughout that period. The club wasn't having the success that it had earlier in the 90s. So what was the period that you spent here like, and why Adelaide?
Look, it was probably a different challenge for me. And I saw, like I said, I was at Melbourne Knights for a while, and it was just something different for me. And I probably got too comfortable at Melbourne, 6 years. I was 25 then, or 26, I think I was. And I was probably just felt like I just needed a change. I just needed to move. And Adelaide City come up, and it was, look, I love my time in Adelaide. It was wasn't the most successful period, obviously, for Adelaide City. But I love my time there. I love getting to know the town, obviously, and getting to know the players and the Adelaide City fans and people that I saw coming back to Adelaide last year. And when I visited over the last few months when I was in Melbourne, visited Adelaide as well. Look, I look back, and I think my first year there was myself, Carl Veart, and Aurelio Vidmar, Claudio Pelosi, and Gianluca Legati as the more senior players. Now, we had Adrian Chagall was in goals, and then the rest was made up of young South Australian boys and boys that have gone on and had some great careers: Lucas Pantelis, Ian Fife, Aaron Goulding, Christian Reese, Ivan Karlovic. There was Lewis Brain. Was there anyone else? I think Basil's son, David Scarcella was in goals. He was, young goalkeeper coming through as well. Daniel Godley was in goals, who obviously played a good career there in the NPLSA as well. Look, it was Mario Karlovic is another one. Obviously, over to Mario. Mario went and played it in Europe as well. So there was Mimi Saric, obviously, was there for a while. So there was a lot of players. That Nick Buddin, and I may have forgotten other players, but there was so many of them, and I felt it was a joy to play with them, and lead them. And we had tough times, and as you do with those boys when they're playing, a lot of them come from, playing straight away. It wasn't, been blending in with, it wasn't just the one or two young boys. It was, a whole group of them. And as happens when you have you have ups and downs. The season's a roller coaster. You have some great results, and then you have a bad result. But that's what happens. And I think my last year there, I ended up captaining the team as well. So it was enjoyable. It was difficult, but I really loved my time in Adelaide, and that's why when the opportunity to come back and work at Adelaide United, obviously several years later, it was a no-brainer for me. I really enjoyed, immersed myself, and I went and actually played for a couple of games. I think I had 6 games at Adelaide Raiders as well during the off season. I went and played a few games. So I had a stint there, and I entwined myself in local South Australian football, and I felt I got to know it intimately as much as I would have if I grew up there. So it really did feel like home for me. Like I said, enjoyed it. It was a tough time. We had I think the last year we made the finals, which was that 10-game round robin finals. But I think Scott Tunbridge is another one. I always loved Scotty as well. Scott Tunbridge was another one. I played with him at South Melbourne later too. So like I said, sorry, mate. There's the names are coming up, and like I said, just there's probably 8 or 9 players there that are young South Aussie boys that come through there. And obviously went on and had very good careers beyond that. And someone like M5 played overseas, and Christian Reese had a good career. So these boys, like I said, these guys were great to work with. And so that was my time. But I do look back on it fondly. I remember some bigger crowds at Adelaide. We didn't have too many big crowds there. We had a few bigger ones, but it was disappointing. Hindmarsh was a great place to play at. Obviously, always when I was Melbourne Knights visiting, Hindmarsh was a fantastic venue to play at, and playing there for 3 years, I loved would have loved to have big crowds like obviously Adelaide United got when they started. Would have loved that, but playing there, I always just look back on that fondly.
That's great, and I love the passion that you're displaying when you speak about the time you had here in Adelaide, I guess the first time round, which is great, Ante. We'll move forward. So you then had a stint at Raiders, which you mentioned, another Croatian club to tick off just for good measure, before heading back home to play for the Greek giants South Melbourne. Then came the move to Malaysia. So tell us what that experience was like. I understand this was during the period where the NSL paused in time for the A-League to launch, where a few people went off to Malaysia. So what was that like? Obviously a vastly different experience.
Yeah, so let me just go back to South Melbourne. I had a great time at South Melbourne too. I just wanted to mention that. So I didn't the club there was fantastic. We had a good year as well, and which ultimately culminated to the loss to Adelaide United in Adelaide. I did score my only brace in the NSL years, 2 goals against Adelaide United that year as well. It's at Bob Jane Stadium. So
wow.
Just want to reminisce about that a little. So that was quite.
That one went to extra time, didn't it? Oh no, we won in regulation time.
No, the final went into extra time. No, but
it did.
We won 2-1 at Bob Jane Stadium against Adelaide United. Obviously, we won 2-1, and I scored both goals. So that was like I said, a fond memory as a defender. Scoring.
You scored a fair few, mate. Were you getting up for headers?
Not a fair few, mate.
You did, yeah.
Not a fair few.
The internet says otherwise.
Yeah, no. I don't know. Maybe my mum's got on there and added a few extra goals on there. So, no. So look, and then he culminated obviously into the game. The finals game in Adelaide was awesome. It was a fantastic event. I thought we were 1-0 up, I think, at half time, and we had a player sent off just at half time. And then Eugene Galekovic was our goalkeeper as well at South Melbourne. So another Adelaide connection there. Which I thought was it was a packed house at Hindmarsh. Once again, I loved playing at Hindmarsh. It was a packed house, even though they were cheering against me. I still enjoyed the experience. But then ultimately went and lost. I think Rich Alagic scored the penalty in extra time, which was sudden death extra time as well. Yeah. So killed the hopes, and obviously Adelaide went on, I believe, lost to Perth Glory the next preliminary final. But anyway, so just want to reminisce about another little connection with Adelaide there as well during my time at South Melbourne. But then, like I said, like you mentioned, went to Malaysia. Obviously, the NSL shut down. Malaysia was, from a cultural experience, Malaysia was fantastic. Football, it wasn't professional over there as well, although it was professional games. It was professional football. We probably ended up playing 30 games. There was cups galore. The season we were playing, weekend Wednesday. From a purely, I was probably the fittest I ever was, obviously playing and training in humidity as well, 90% humidity, whatever it was. But I think I ended up playing, 30 games in probably 6 months or so, or less than 6 months, I'd say I was there. So that was a fantastic experience. So obviously with no football here in Australia, a lot of people went overseas, but there was a lot of, Mark Rudin went there, Tommy Pondiak. I actually went there with Ross Aloisi.
Yeah.
He was there for a short time before heading back to Adelaide as well. So I did play a couple of months there with Ross Aloisi before he left. But like I said, living in Kuala Lumpur, culturally it was great. Getting to know the language, different culture, different style of football. It was quite a relaxed style of football, but, being that humid, I don't know if you can have a very energetic game of football in Malaysia. And we had our kickoff times were at 8:45 at night, which, probably put me to sleep, this day and age. But ultimately then you're playing, like I said, it's probably the coolest time of day in Malaysia. So,
yeah,
it's the only reasonable time to play at. So, but look, it was a great experience and obviously a great time to continue playing football. And as a player, all you want to do is play games, training. I'm sure that as probably every A-League season, the players harp on and everyone harps on about, the longer off season in the or pre-season in the world. And they just want to play games. And that's what when I go back to mention, obviously, 22 or 26 games in the A-League is just not enough for footballers, not for professional footballers. And in Malaysia, we just, like I said, we got that bulk of games. It was, like I said, FA Cups, the Malaysia Cups was another end of season round robin tournament. It was just fantastic. And as a footballer, that's what you want. And that's how you're going to get better. You're going to get fitter. You're going to improve. And that's if you want to say what's best for footballers or for the football of the country, play games. They just got to play more games and at a higher level as possible. So, but yeah, so Malaysia was great. Had that 1 year before coming back the year after and joining Perth Glory.
Not the only Adelaide United person that was a centre-back that made waves at Selangor, I might add, and people might pick up on the Taylor Regan connection there. We'll move forward. So you mentioned that you joined Perth Glory in the A-League for the commencement of the A-League, the first ever A-League season. Now, unfortunately, the club didn't hit the heights on the pitch that it had done back in the NSL era. So despite this being a productive move for you, where you played over 30 games in the 2 seasons you were there from 05 to 07, why do you think the Glory struggled to replicate the kind of form that they showcased back in the NSL, Ante?
Well, look, the Glory at that time, obviously NSL time, apart from maybe the first year or two before we all saw the crowds that they were managing to get, we're not professional, I think, in that first year. But then as the crowds got bigger, the sponsors probably more come on board. I think Damien Murray left Adelaide United to go to Adelaide City, to go to Perth Glory.
Yep.
Brad Maloney was there, Kombutsianis, John Markovsky, Jason Petkovic left Adelaide, went back there. So they were no doubt signing the best players available in the league. And like I said, I think and this is what I fear for the A-League. If there's a breakaway between the haves and the have-nots in the league, I think it's dangerous for it to become a 3 or 4 horse race, and then the rest of the clubs. And what seemed to happen, and whether Adelaide City did it or Melbourne Knights or even, South Melbourne was still competitive in that last year when I was there. But, a lot of the smaller clubs may not spend the money or try to compete with the big money because it's not going to get them these players anyway. So I don't think anybody else could have signed Damien Murray that year on what he was getting paid in. And not that I know what he was getting paid, but, there's always speculation. But he got paid some very good money to play NSL football for Perth Glory. Now, the haves back then compared to the have-nots was quite vast between the clubs. So Perth Glory obviously had a good stint. They made finals, obviously won the last 2 championships as well. But when you look at the rest of the league, obviously the NSL days, obviously my time in Adelaide, so from 2000, the last 4 years of the NSL was, and I know speaking to clubs, even when I went back to South Melbourne, clubs weren't out there to try to win the championship, just try to be sustainable, and that's it. Maybe Perth Glory were still trying to win the championship. Obviously, Sydney Olympic was spending money. Parramatta Power, I think, were another one of the powerhouses then. So a lot of the clubs were trying to spend the money, and and when you can go and pick up, and I think their squad, it wasn't just, there was obviously no salary cap, so Perth Glory can just sign whoever they wanted to sign back then. Parramatta Power did the same thing. I think Travis Dodd went and played Parramatta Power. Simon Colosimo was playing that. They had a great team as well in that last. I think they lost the final in the last year in the NSL as well. So these clubs were able to pick and choose which players they want from across the country. And, who was going to refuse coming to play, in Perth in front of 15,000 people on a weekly basis? It was fantastic. So unfortunately, we're going back to the A-League season. So I think that obviously, and it's probably the salary cap in the A-League, I think that no doubt evened the competition. And ultimately, that was probably the most even the competition will ever be with the salary cap, because as years have gone on, there's been little exemptions created, which have really just worked for the more richer clubs that can exploit's the wrong word, but use those exemptions to field more expensive teams. So that's where, like I said, I'll go back to my, point about haves and have-nots. The more loopholes you create, or a softer cap that you create. Yes, we can say it's a salary cap and it's meant to be even, and like the AFL, you have your turn in being up. Well, it's probably not right in the way the soft caps run in the A-League in current day compared to the way it was in the first couple of years of the A-League, because it was pretty much a hard cap apart from, I think it was one marquee player for each club at that first year or two. And that was really it. So, I think in terms of the evenness of the competition, it was going to be as even as possible. Probably throughout, the whatever we're at 14, 15 years of the A-League now.
Yeah.
That's as even as the competition probably ever was, and it's slowly dwindled away from that to a softer cap, which means the richer clubs that can afford to spend money in these little, extra loopholes or exemptions that the league makes, which I think they've created another one for a designated player now of, I think it's $300,000 to $600,000. So that's just another addition to the cap of here you can sign another $300,000 or $600,000 player, which is going to be outside of the cap. So it's like having an extra $600,000 in the cap for those clubs that can afford it. So that's where. So I think that was probably the main point. And I think there was maybe uncertainty with obviously Nick Tana was the owner then. Obviously had a lot of success previously. Probably I think it probably harmed maybe Perth Glory because it probably stopped the bandwagon, from being for that 14 or 16 month break in football we had in Australia. It probably hurt Perth Glory more than it hurt other clubs. But I must say that, Perth Glory were probably the catalyst for the A-League because I think we all saw what football can be in this country, and maybe it needed that sort of representation of the city, and like I said, that broad-based fan base, if you like, and it's I think Perth Glory showed us the way, and we wanted 8 or 10 or 12 Perth Glories across the country, and that's kind of where we're at now. And obviously there's still issues, no doubt, but that's where I think Perth Glory's definitely got to take credit for showing us the way.
Yeah, and I think it's a worthy mention to also acknowledge that I believe they say Perth Glory was the only professional club or professionally run club during the NSL era. And even though you've kind of gone on to say that, the other clubs caught up because of the salary cap and whatnot, Brian Dean coming in season 1, there was ambition there shown, surely, wasn't there?
Yeah, look, I love Brian Dean when he was here. He was he was an absolute gentleman of the game. I felt for him because he come, mate, I think he come, probably from off his Spanish villa a week before the season started and played the first game. And as I know, as the older you get, the more better prepared you need to be for football. And I don't know whether he was, I don't know whoever brought him over explained to him that it's not that easy a competition. It is still physical, and it is during warmer months. And even when William Gallas come out to Perth Glory a number of years later,
yeah.
it was difficult for him as well. So, it was 36, I think, when he came out. So I don't think he was given the best opportunity to prove what he could do. And ultimately, he left us and joined Sheffield United in the Championship in January.
Yeah,
and saw the rest of his season out there. So, and I'll tell you what, he was one player as working as a club administrator beyond that. He was one player that tore up his contract and happily left and didn't ask for a payout or anything. A lot of players get payouts. A lot of players will sit on their ass and do nothing. But he said, no, I'm copping heat here. I don't need it. He was happy to walk away from his contract and go back to England and not give negativity, obviously, for himself, but even for the club. So he's an absolute gentleman, and I got to give him every credit for that. A lot of players could, he could have enjoyed his time here in Australia. Perth's a great time in summer. Could have saw it out, enjoyed, sitting down at Cottesloe Beach and having coffees in the morning and drinks at night, and saw the next 3 or 4 months out of his contract or whatever it was, but he didn't. And I begged him to stay, but I loved him, and he had enough. He didn't want to, like I said, he didn't want to put himself through that negativity because, as even you mentioned, it's a memorable thing from you guys, but I look at it from a different view and what he did and how he come in. So there's a lot of things that people don't understand on how it happened, and I really feel for him that he wasn't, brought in brought in 2 months before the season started and given a proper pre-season.
So, Ante, after moving on from Perth Glory in 2007, you joined Floreat Athena, the opposition for us this Sunday, of course. Spent quite a number of years there. So tell us how you came to have this affinity for the club in the twilight of your career, and I guess how much success you had in that period of time, because you were there for a number of years, and you did tell us before that you were invincible Swan season 2.
Yeah, so just had a couple of friends that were involved in a club that I got to know in my couple of years in Perth. And as my time finished up at Perth Glory, obviously I was going to go continue playing. I still felt good to play. So, spoke to a couple of clubs, but the people I spoke with there, who's one of the guys, still the current president there right now, Con Poulios, met them, and I just felt immediate connection with them, and was happy to sign for them for that year in 2007. And stayed there for the next 5 years. And like I said, we won obviously the championship undefeated that first year. I think we won a cup in 2009. I was a player coach in 2010 and 11. Won a night series championship, made a finals. So look, the club's been always up there, always been one of the stronger clubs in Perth. It is about 2 kilometres from my home here in Perth, so it's always feels like a local club there as well. Obviously, made a lot of friends there over the years, and it's a great little venue there as well. Like I said before, I enjoyed playing there. It creates that little bit of a cauldron effect. It's like a bowl in there, and always enjoyed playing there. Always enjoyed the venue and the people around there. So finished up there in 2011, and that was pretty much it on my playing. I played the year after in a lower division club called Canning City.
Yep.
Just went there and played, just helped a mate of mine was coaching there. Went there and played out about half a season there before went overseas and had a bit of a break from football and did holidays and trips and Euros and everything. So, yeah, and then obviously I was still working at Perth Glory at the time, started working at Perth Glory in 2009. So 2 years after I finished playing for Perth Glory, I rejoined them in football operations role and worked for them for 7 years before joining Adelaide United.
Yeah, so I mean, it's an interesting point here because I did want to ask, whilst you were sort of finishing up as a player, did you always have an idea post-playing career that you'd work in operational roles at pro football clubs?
Yeah, look, I think most players do want to have some sort of role in a football club. You know, I was still playing, so I was kind of still involved in football. So, but I was a software programmer as well. So I did an IT degrees back when I was playing and studying. So I had a bit of work experience in IT. So I went into an IT job straight after football, obviously playing NPL and working full time. But then, look, obviously I worked as a business analyst and as I said, software programmer. So I had a bit of business etiquette, if you like, and business experience in the real world. And it was David Mitchell that was coaching at the time, and he was my assistant coach in my last year with Ron Smith. So we kind of spoke. I always attend the games, always involved in the club and watching games and following football, obviously. But then there was a role that opened up that led me through the football operations path, and like I said, that was back in 2009, and spent 12 years in that role. And so obviously, look, I still find myself very lucky. It was always a privilege to work in football as a former player, to continue working in football, regardless of not being coaching and playing until you're 40 or whatever. But I still, I think it's the luckiest job in the world. It was great. It was, like I said, as a former player, that's the sort of roles players do want. They wanted to coach if that were, other roles. But look, it's not easy, and I think a lot of players find it difficult to get into a 9-to-5 job, if you like, or football's a 24-hour job sometimes in that role, where it's not a regular 9-to-5 job where you can switch off at 5 p.m. So I think working in the real world gave me, and I had done that before, just gave me a bit of grounding that to be able to go from an office environment, an IT environment, into a football environment. Once again, being a footballer all my life from a young kid. That was a joy for me. So, there's no way I was going to turn it down. And, I made the most of it as much as I could and enjoyed every minute of it. It was fantastic.
And you nearly got to see the Glory win their maiden A-League championship in 2012. How could we forget that daylight robbery against Brisbane Roar in Brisbane? We'll move on. So obviously the door opened for you to join us in 2015 as our director of football, where you held that post for a number of years. You spent a number of seasons at Adelaide United, obviously, Ante, more highs than lows, I think we can safely say. So what are your best memories from your time here in Adelaide?
Yeah, look, once again, that year, much like most Adelaide fans remember, is the grand final year. So that was fantastic. Obviously, that was my first year I joined. We did make a couple of changes throughout that year. Obviously, Stefan Mork was the one, Osama Malik going the other way to Melbourne City. We also sold Jimmy Jego that year as well, in that January window too. So, which, it was quite an interesting time there. That we, the coaching staff were hesitant to let Jimmy Jego go. So it was, it probably wasn't strictly a club decision, but Jimmy Jego was going to be out of contract at the end of the year. We did have Stefan Moore coming across. We did think that Stefan Moore could be that direct replacement for Jimmy Jego, and I think ultimately he was a better replacement for the club at that time. So yes. I think that worked. And like I said, we probably would have lost Jimmy Jego at the end of that year anyway. So that was probably obviously the main piece of business there, which was good, obviously. And that was a very memorable season. But I think ultimately for myself, that was great. Loved being part of it. Loved obviously the coaching staff, the players were great. Everything just, apart from the horrendous first 8 game start, where I don't think we won in the first 8 games, which was horrendous for everybody. But the way that season started to the way it ended, it was a total ride, and just like a steam train just picking up steam. And then at the end of it, we had big crowds. There was a big crowd against Melbourne City in the league game, and then obviously the semi-final, and then obviously the grand final at Adelaide Oval. So it was the second grand final I won in Adelaide that I was a part of. So I enjoyed it. But but look, I think professionally, purely from doing my job for the club. I think that the transition year from Guillermo leaving, obviously a lot of older players leaving, to bringing Marco Kurtz in, and then a whole new age group of players, I suppose, and refreshing and regenerating the team. That was probably, from a purely professional point of view, as you know, I think a football director, even a football coach, wants a blank slate to start with, and that was probably as close as it got to me. For me at Adelaide United, when we did lose a lot of players moved on, to be able to rebuild that team, regenerate the team, obviously bring in some good quality players, bring in some good young players, bringing in a Paul Izzo back from Central Coast, who had a couple of years there, another, you know, a good established player come in, and rebuild the team, and you know, which I think, you know, build further success for the club throughout the years beyond just that 1 or 2 years that you know we were there. So that was from a purely professional point of view, that was the most job satisfaction, if you like. You know, winning the championship was great, emotionally it was fantastic. It was, you know, I can't deny that. But from a pure professional job satisfaction point of view, and having to get my hands so dirty to do what I needed to do, along with the coaching staff and the club and Greg Griffin at the time, who was the owner at the time, and give me, you know, a full trust in me to go out and do what's needed to do to rebuild this club after that bad year we had, you know, with the grand final hangover, if you like, or the championship hangover. So, but look, as you said, a lot of highs, and then to finish my reign, really, I was obviously still with the club when Gertchen was there, but the last game here in Perth against Perth Glory, Adelaide United, obviously the semi-final to get into the grand final. Coming back from 2-0 down to equalise 2-2, coming back from 3-2 down in extra time to equalise 3-3, having a chance in the penalty shootout, being ahead and potentially, you know, winning the impossible after, you know, in Perth against the top team all year, you know, Tony Popovic's Perth Glory. We played Melbourne City on the Sunday in Adelaide, that went to 120 minutes of football and scored in the final minutes against Melbourne City.
Ben Halloran.
When you look at Ben Halloran scored, and you know, when you look at the, you know, what Melbourne City spent and the way they, you know, the professionalism they have, you know, and the finances behind them to do that against them, I think we deserve that win as well. And then, you know, 4 days later, back it up and travel to Perth and back it up. And for the boys, and credit to the coaching staff and the boys to be that prepared. And I think that, you know, the hard work they put in throughout the year, the boys knew they could get there, and that's why they kept on going right to the final minute. You know, maybe we just didn't have the, you know, the established players through that pressure, you know, of another penalty shootout, you know, and managed to come back. But then the penalty shootout, obviously, you know, was there a couple of weak penalties. You know, it's a pressure cooker, and you know, it was shattering. Everyone was shattered by it, no doubt. The fans were shattered by it, but it was a fairy tale run which I felt culminated in that 2 years of, you know, they started 2 years earlier to rebuild that club, and that's what we, you know, that's where we wanted to go. That's where we saw us, and you know, we look. There was a lot of, and I really didn't like it. There was a lot of talk about, you know, training them hard, the German style. It's old school and what have you. But look, I tell you what, and a lot of boys I spoke to that day after the game at Perth Glory, they knew what they did in the last 2 years actually prepared them to be able to back up, you know, that 120-minute game on a Sunday to another 120-minute game on a Friday, because of their mental and physical preparation for that. You know, they knew they could do it. Now, that was, you know, I don't think anyone's performed like that in the A-League in terms of physically. You know, I'm not talking, you know, the quality of football, that's a different discussion, but in terms of physically being able to put their bodies and minds through that and get out the other end and make it to the penalty shootout, which is a lottery. But, you know, I really, you know, Marco going to Melbourne victory, that's a, you know, I've got my own thoughts on that, which I'll keep private. But I really don't like. I really believe. Look, I love Greg Griffin because he was a hard worker. I'm a hard worker, and we brought in Marco because he's a hard worker. And the hard work he puts in, he's not there expecting the players to work out. He puts in the hard work as well. I think throughout those 2 years, he worked for that team to, which ultimately is for the club to be as good as possibly they can. And I think if you look at the player pound, you know, player for player, name for name on that team sheet against Melbourne City the week before, and against Perth Glory in that semi-final, no one gave us a chance. People were surprised that we actually made the finals that year. 100%. You know, and there was a lot of talk. Well, how the hell you guys didn't even deserve to be there, let alone almost make a grand final. You know, so that's not purely luck. I don't think it's far from luck. That's the pure hard work all the players and all the staff put in for those 2 years to get there. Like I said, from that rebuilding phase to get to that point, and all the players were brought in, and all the work ethic that they put in, week in, week out, obviously the games and throughout those 2 years. I was proud of them. I was proud of the team and the club, and obviously the boys and what they produced. And it was it was probably the biggest heartache of my career as a football administrator. Seriously.
Wow. You've articulated that amazingly well. I've got to ask, that Perth Glory game could well have been the most spectacular / awkward finale, because had we prevailed there and then, God knows, even won the A-League and then sent Marco packing, it would have been weird. But we'll park that, because that's not anything you could do. You couldn't do anything to change that. But Guillermo Moore, how close was he to being sacked?
No, look,
in the championship season, I mean.
No. To be honest, there was no discussion about him being sacked in that championship year. No, there wasn't. It was about what we can do to.
There was on the outside, as you know, everyone will always speculate, but there was some concrete stuff put out by some reputable people that he was on the edge. Yeah,
look, unless there were discussions without me, and obviously I was new that year as well, so unless there were discussions without me, there was no discussion with me involved of Guillermo being, booted out the door. There was no. I don't think so. I think there was definitely respect there for Guillermo. I think obviously who he was and what he's done, and obviously he actually took over that pre-season as well from Joseph Gombau, who left during the pre-season, I believe. So Gombau left before I come on board as well, and I come on board when Guillermo obviously took over the reins there. So yeah, look, I wasn't privy or part of any serious discussion for Guillermo to leave throughout that slow start to that season. Obviously, history tells us it worked out well not to pull the gun. But look, even in that second year, obviously when we went poor, we probably had a similarly poor start, probably not as bad a start.
Yeah.
And obviously we didn't recover that year. Obviously, we ended up second last, so that was an even worse year. But the discussion, look, could we do it? Why would we do it? Will it be better? We don't know. So it wasn't going to happen that second year as well. And speaking to Greg, the owner at the time as well, and the board, the decision was made to make sure that Guillermo's the coach for the rest of the year and give him every chance to redeem, try to improve the season. We had Asian Champions League game that year as well, which I think we lost the playoff game. The playoff game was actually the year before we actually had Asian Champions League and had the group stages there as well. So we saw that out as well. So that first year, not at all. Not that I was privy to.
There you go. We'll leave that there. I want to move on. You obviously were replaced in 2019 by Bruce Jitte. What was that sort of exit like? Was it was it you going on your terms?
Look, it was when new ownership come on board. I knew my days were numbered. I knew my days were numbered. So I knew, obviously, I had a gut feeling that obviously Marco Kurtz was the previous regime's appointments. I knew I had a gut feeling, regardless of what happened that year, that there'd be a change in coaching staff and a change in myself as well. Obviously, I really had Vidmar come on board briefly as well earlier throughout that last year there. So look, I had no issue with Aurelio or Bruce for that matter. I knew, look, football's football, and people take over clubs and they want to do things their own way, and then they judged on their decisions. Was it the right decision to get rid of Marco? Well, that's for, you guys can make up that whether it was or not. I think, Pete's come in, or the new ownership have come in, and they've decided to do whatever they want to do. And like I said, for me, as a former player, to be involved in football, it was great. And your days are always numbered in football, whether you're a coach, a CEO, or a football manager, whatever it is. Your days are numbered. As a coach is always hired to be fired, but there is an element of that for a lot of other roles involved in football as well. So, to have 4 years in Adelaide and have success and, like I said, professional satisfaction out of it, no doubt, and working with good people and making a lot of good friends, new friends, as well as catching up with old friends and reigniting those relationships. I loved every minute of it there, and I enjoyed my time there, and my time was up. I've got no hard feelings, and I was happy to, I'm happy to see the club try to still, I'd still like to think that the club try to continue on what we built throughout those years of my time there. And, that's, you guys are fans there, or the listeners or whatever are fans there, so they can decide how that went or not. That's not my job really, but we gave everything with the ownership that got me in and what I did during my time there. I felt I gave everything for the club and tried to do the right things for the club, and not just for the right things while I was there, the right things for the club, for the building blocks to have sustained success over the number of years, and that's what we wanted to do. And I look back on the Paul Izzo signing was probably the one that kind of highlighted what we try to do. Eugene obviously was a legend of the club and a former teammate of mine. He's a Melbourne boy as well, so I knew him from a long period of time. And it was a very difficult time then, and we didn't have a coach for the year after. Eugene was out of contract, and we had to see what the deal was with Eugene. Do we keep him or do we sign him? Do we move him into a coaching role? I believe he felt he still could play, but we weren't ready to give him a playing contract until we had a coaching staff on board, and we discussed potential other roles, but it didn't materialise. Obviously, he ended up going to Melbourne City then. But we felt that bringing in a Paul Izzo was perhaps the right decision to make at that time. But not the right just for that time, but the right decision for the future of the club moving forward. Because Eugene had another year or two of football, but then we'd have to look for another goalkeeper again. Yeah. So when Paul Izzo was able to return to Adelaide, we decided that's the best thing for this club, not just today, but for the future of this club. Now, Paul Izzo went on, played for the club for 3 years, won a couple of cups, finals football, and the club sold him to Europe. So I think history tells us that was the right decision to do. It was a tough decision. It wasn't an easy decision either to let someone like you, or not give Eugene an immediate contract, because it is an easy decision because it's a winner. People love it. Okay, he's great, he's a legend. We'll give him a contract. But I suppose that goalkeeper position is always tougher because Eugene would want to play, and Paul Izzo come in would want to play too. So, but that was a decision we made for the future of the club, and that's the way I felt. What I wanted to do. Obviously with Greg there, that's what we talked about of giving these younger players that are there going to be there for a number of years, not just for this year or for today. So that's where I kind of feel when I say do the right things for the club, that's what I felt I did the right things, even though I've moved on. Paul Izzo still gave back to the club, which was from our decision we made back, 3 years before, the time when he actually got there. So, which I think was a positive for the club on the field and off the field, and Paul Izzo moving overseas after that.
I don't think it's as much of a sore point as you sort of might think it is either. I think people just accepted it. And with Paul Izzo being as good as he was, particularly in that 18-19 and then 19-20, he was absolutely phenomenal. He was still making a few mistakes back in 18-19, but by the end of the hub, he was the best keeper in the league, in many people's opinion. And I don't think many people really have gone on to hold a grudge, if you like, because, yes, the Eugene departure was probably could have been handled a bit better, but football goes that way, and I don't think it's that much of a sore point, Ante. But moving on, you did depart. You'll always have that championship on your CV, obviously. You then moved to Perth, head coach position at Floreat Athena, and then you followed that after being headhunted by Western United to become the general manager there. You probably might have liked to have been in both roles a little longer than you were. Is that a fair comment?
At Western United, you mean?
At Floreat too, because
look, Floreat Athena was always, so when I come back, obviously I finished up in Adelaide and come back to Perth, and the Floreat Athena coaching job came up early in the year. So we had I probably had a good 3 or 4 months with the club, and then there was a break in between through obviously the original COVID lockdown in March last year. And then we restarted back in June and July. So, look, it wasn't always a temporary thing. Look, the discussion with Western United was over a couple of months. So I did alert my club there, with the hierarchy of Floreat Athena, that I am in discussions with Western United. So it wasn't a surprise. Yeah, look, I enjoyed my time there. It was, I was disappointed I had to leave, but ultimately, for another major role in football, it was always a step up back into the professional game. Yeah. So the club understood that. And I think, coming in there with my assistant, Vas Vujicic, who also was a former goalkeeper at the club when I was back there as well. So he pretty much slid into my role and took over. So I think we kind of left a rolling legacy, not a legacy, but left it untainted with me leaving and him taking over. It was seamless transition. Yeah. So that worked out well. And obviously, look, Western United, it was, it didn't work out the way I'd hoped. I obviously had a year there. Western United, that's in the western part of Melbourne was where I grew up playing football. So I felt there was an affinity there going back to my childhood years, and hoping to have more of an influence there, perhaps. We did start up a couple of NPL teams there, which once again, going through that youth phase, I really do enjoy that. I really do think they're important building blocks for clubs. So we did start, and unfortunately, those, as I mentioned earlier, those clubs have had, or those leagues have been shut down. So the boys have only played about 13 or 14 games this season. But I think there's a couple of players from that team that have stepped into the A-League squad, or got a couple of scholarship contracts, been promoted into those squads. So that's beneficial for the club that we identify that these players, along with Ante Kovacevic, who was the coach there, and helped to develop them throughout the year that they worked there. So look, that was. If you're going to say what was my highlight from that, look, that was great that I, was part of that, creating that the development structure and pathway there at West United. But look, people have, once again, football's football. People have different ideas. Sometimes we're on the same page, sometimes we're not. And I was on a different page to a few of the people there, influential people at West United, and we both move our own ways. And I wish them all the best. And I think for the betterment of football, hopefully they're a success. But it's up to them now. But I was happy. I'm not. I don't want to just be involved in football for the sake of being involved in football. I like to, like I said, I try to do the right things for the club, for the team, for what's best for football wherever I'm at. And if people want to go a different direction, then that's their choice. And I'm happy to move on. And I'll get back involved in football on some level. And like when I left Adelaide, I got back happy to get back involved with Floreat Athena and help out there. So it doesn't really bother me. I enjoy the game. I'll get involved at whatever level I can to put something back into the game. And it doesn't have to be professionally. NPL's all part time and what have you anyway. So enjoyed that. And what comes next, we'll soon find out.
That does lead us to the present day. So right now, you mentioned off the top of the show that you're just taking it easy, enjoying watching football again as a fan more than anything. So tell us, I guess, if you can elaborate on what your current circumstances are and what does the future hold for Ante Kovacevic?
Yeah, look, I think personally, after, obviously, like I said, it's been 12 years since I've been involved in football administration professionally with the A-League. I'm probably to the point where I just need some time off, and that's what I did plan to do. I have planned and I'm doing right now is to take the rest of the year off and see what happens in 2022. I think with the current environment and landscape, it's probably the right time because nothing's really happening out there with COVID lockdowns and lack of games, and even the FFA Cup's kind of half run at the moment with a lot of the other games uncertain. So look, I'm happy just to be an observer now, enjoy, I suppose, time away from the game. Like I said, I'm always watching the game, but just time away from the daily rigmarole and constant focus. And like I said before, it is a 24-hour job. It's non-stop. It's any time, and it's. I think I just need just some time off. There's no more coaching here anyway, so maybe if the league was running here, I might have dipped my foot in the water and helped out somewhere potentially. But the league's already finished here as well, so it's have the summer off, enjoy a bit of summertime. Hopefully there's no lockdowns here in Perth. And like I said, watch football. I'd love to see the A-League start. I'd love to see what the new TV broadcaster brings to the game. Hopefully it's a success. I think we're all football lovers that are involved in this game, and obviously yourself and people that, are out there watching media, social media, whatever it may be. We all want success for the game, and that's at every level. So, I can happily sit back and watch and enjoy it. And, like I said, I'm hoping the A-League isn't too interrupted this year, or this season, and hopefully kicks off. But I think it's bits of that are going to be out of their hands. So time will tell.
I just want to finish on this point. I think it's interesting looking at your career as a player and then working in upstairs departments at football clubs and everything else that you've dabbled in. You've gotten around. I think you've really kind of ingrained yourself across 3 states. So I want to ask you're a Victorian by birth. Are you parochial? Because when I look at Ante Kovacevic's CV, you could fool me as to thinking that you're from WA, Vic, or SA. It's I don't feel like you're sort of attached to one place. So to put it sort of bluntly.
Funnily enough, I do get asked that. I mean, people, I think there was some people in Adelaide thought, I thought you were a Perth boy, and then I go to Melbourne, I thought you were an Adelaide boy. And I think Massimo Madoka was working, so I played with him at South Melbourne. He thought I was an Adelaide boy because I come from Adelaide City to South Melbourne. And people always ask. But look, I've lived probably 20 odd years of my life now, of my adult life, out of out of Victoria. Look, I like to immerse myself into wherever I'm at, and even coming here involved in the NPL, and I was used to, after I finished, I was coaching kids around town and stuff as well. So I like to immerse myself and understand the history of the clubs and understand. And we had a Floreat Athena 70th anniversary. Was their 70th anniversary a couple of weeks ago, and I made the 70th anniversary team. It was like a dream team, and just the old boys and listening. And I felt I was part of the old history of the club because I've immersed myself into that club as a player and as a coach, and with the people involved and talking to the former players and understanding what they went through and who their stars were and what have you. So, Stan Lazarides was another one here, and because he was in Adelaide and I was in Adelaide, so we had. And I played with him at Glory, and he played at Floreat Athena. So it was. I just felt I was part of it more than what it actually was, and I feel I did that in Adelaide, and I was planning to come to the Adelaide City's 75th anniversary as well, which was meant to be held, I believe, in end of July, which obviously with the COVID lockdowns was scrapped now. But I felt an affinity there at Adelaide City as well, So I did, like I said, I suppose I try to put my heart into what I'm doing, and when you're playing a sport or involved in a sport, as we do, I'm lucky enough to be able to play, coach, and administer in the sport that we love. So it'd be remiss of me not to immerse myself in there. It's just not a job. It's not a job for me. I don't see it as a job, and that's when, even when I finished playing, I didn't have hard feelings against Ron Smith, and Dave Mitchell was the assistant coach. I still come and watch them, and that was, I knew your time's up, your time's up. It's a game of opinions, and that's when, when I get put into that position as a football manager, I try to, I went through the same thing, so I do understand. I know it's not easy, but sometimes those decisions have to be made. And my time as an administrator, when new ownerships come in at Adelaide, and it was my time to go. So it's fine. It's okay. I did what I could while I was there, and I felt I put my heart into it. I did the right things, and I got my rewards, and I got my satisfaction out of it. So, and I hope the fans enjoyed it, and the club, people around the club enjoyed it, and the people I work with enjoyed it, and have good things to say about me after I leave. So that's, and I feel I've done that to a large degree, and I feel anywhere I've gone back to the Raiders, okay, there's that Croatian connection, no doubt. I'll, go back to, Greek people like I know Green Gully and Adelaide City, and I've had Floreat Athena and South Melbourne. I feel people that know me, that my time there, knew that when I was there, I put my heart into it. So I have probably that's the happiness I got out of it, that people actually appreciate what I did for them as a player, coach, or administrator.
Well, Ante Kovacevic, so passionate, so knowledgeable. It has been an education listening to you. I've really, really enjoyed it. You enjoy, hopefully, what is a action-packed summer of football that we have to look forward to. Stay safe behind the walls of Emperor McGowan. Enjoy all that there is to come. Ante Kovacevic, it's been great checking in with you. Hopefully, when those borders do come down, we can grab a beer with you in Adelaide and reminisce over some good old times with the Reds. Take care, Ante Kovacevic. It's been great having you on. Thank you so much for your time, and all the best.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and look forward to catching up with some old friends from Adelaide United this weekend as well. But yep, look, next time in Adelaide, definitely catch up for a beer. But look, thanks for your time, and always great talking football.
Enjoy the FFA Cup too, just by the way. I assume you'll be in the director's box.
No, I might be working for Athena and just showing Adelaide boys and trying to put them off their game or something. So we'll see how we go.
Great stuff, Ante Kovacevic. All the best. Thanks for watching, guys. Up the Reds. We'll see you next time.